A. Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to start shortly in a minute or two. Sorry for the delay. We're just waiting for a couple more people. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to everyone in the room who's joined us today and everyone joining us online for this conversation about the potential of the voluntary carbon market for Sahelian communities and the Great Green Wall. My name is Annie Schultz. I'm the Global Advocacy Lead at TreeAid. We are an NGO working now for 37 years alongside African dryland communities, supporting them in landscape restoration across the Great Green Wall. And we're really excited to have you join the conversation today. So this event is about exploring how the voluntary carbon market can empower local communities to restore their landscapes and ecosystems across the Great Green Wall. It's also about exploring how to engage private sector investment into that endeavor. So I'd like to kick us off with a very exciting keynote speech from Jacinda and Njike, who's joining us today, and who's bringing us that very valuable insight from private sector actors. Jacinda is the Managing Director of the Climate Capital Mobilization Accelerator that's housed within Ambition Loop. She's also the Africa lead for the UN High-Level Climate Champions. Jacinda, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. We're really happy to be here. Again, my name is Jacinda Njike, and what we are really focused on is unlocking finance for the transition that we all know that we need. And the voluntary carbon market is a key part of the toolbox which financial actors need to utilize to really enhance the pace and scale at which we can engage in the transition. One of the key things that we note as part of the Climate Champions team, we engaged in what we called regional roundtables with financial actors across the capital stack, from insurers to pension funds to financial institutions, local and MDBs. And really what the outcome was is that there are some serious blocks to capital flowing to a lot of these nature, land, and climate positive projects. And one of the reasons why voluntary carbon markets are so critical to the financial transition is that they are a non-reimbursable, non-interest bearing source of capital that can be directly connected to indigenous communities and local communities, smallholder farmers, and very many of the SMEs that are engaging in the technology and sustainable transformation that we all need. And so the reason why voluntary carbon markets continue to be such a critical piece of the financial architecture is because they do not come with the strings of repayment. They do not come with the debt the debt commitments that really can cause significant problems in the emerging and developing economies where we already have debt stress. And so the idea of, one, in COP29, we were blessed to have Article 6.2 and Article 6.4 move forward. And so even though the compliance market is not completely ready, at least we're moving in the right direction. And I think that what's most important about that is that it is a signal to the market that carbon credits and the carbon market is not, going to go away, but that it is going to get stronger. Excuse me. And I think that behind that carbon market signal is a group of actors, project developers, monitoring, reporting, and verification providers, groups like Vera and Gold Standard, who need to increase and enhance the transparency and integrity of the voluntary carbon market so that it can become a stronger tool for us to use at a global scale in order to invest in some of the harder to reach projects, some of the harder to invest in opportunities. One of the challenges, I'm a former mergers and acquisitions lawyer, and so I understand how boards think. And one of the challenges is the fiduciary duty of most corporations to put profit first. And with a mindset or a capital market value of profits first, purpose often gets left off the balance sheet. Purpose often gets sidelined to, corporate interest. And in fact, they actually have that fiduciary duty to their stakeholders to put profit first. So part of what voluntary carbon markets allows us to do is to enter into those boardrooms with an opportunity to say, hey, we understand that you need to have value for your purpose and your good actions that are in decreasing land degradation and adding to land restoration. And so these carbon credits, whether they're voluntary in markets where there is no compliance market, or whether they are compliance markets in markets like the US and the UK, give corporations an opportunity to invest some of that capital into these projects that are providing restoration, providing agroforestry, and providing SMEs with the capital that they need to kick off projects like cook stove projects, which also help in decreasing the amount of deforestation that we're engaged in. So I think that I really am, excited that we are able to have these conversations here at the land restoration, I call it the land and soil COP, in order to really see what parts of the financial toolbox. There are bonds. Right now, we're working on the Riyadh Action Agenda, which was launched yesterday by the presidency of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And that action agenda basically says non-state actors, private sector, this is how we can get behind the UNCCD COP, and this is how we can help promote the outcomes that are necessary for whether they're the NDCs, the NBSAPs, or the land neutrality plans. It's a state level process, but we need the private sector to actually do the work and make the transition in the real economy in order to support those goals of reducing carbon, of increasing land restoration. And so it's really exciting to have the Riyadh Action Agenda, which is a place where non-state actors can kind of link in and dock in and say, for land, this is what we can do, this is what we want to do, and this is what we need to do more. For water, for drought resilience, these are the avenues that are available to us currently, and these are some of the more aspirational things that we can do if we work more collectively together. And then finance, we consider as an enabler, when the governance, science and technology, and finance as key enablers to achieve the land, water, and agri-food systems changes that we want to see in place. And so voluntary carbon markets are a huge part. And again, they're not the only, it's not a silver bullet, it's not the only way to fund this transition, but it is a key tool in that toolbox, whether there's bonds, whether there's KPI-linked sustainability insurance products, which can help underwrite some of the risk for agriculture and other food systems players, whether it's incentivizing banks with lower interest rates for regenerative agriculture and other products. The market right now is open to a lot of interesting, innovative financial mechanisms, but I think we also have to take what has been working, what actually does work, and do more of that. And in order to do more of that, we have to show the increased integrity and transparency and ability for the carbon market to actually deliver on its mandate to support these types of innovative projects. And so with that, I'll really thank you all for coming today, and thank you for, continuing to push to ensure that the voluntary carbon markets are strengthened and that they're scaled and that we are able to support the people on the ground who need that capital in order to offset some of the costs that are related to a transition economy. So thank you very much for the invitation today, and look forward to the deliberations.
Thank you so much, Jacinda. I'd like now to turn to someone also who's bringing a crucial perspective to this conversation, since the voluntary carbon market are also about putting communities in the drylands in the driver's seat. So who better to kick us off than the inspirational Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim? Most of you know Hindou as the president of AFPAT, the Association for Fulani Women and Indigenous People of Chad. But she's also the co-chair of the Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change and an SDG advocate. Hindou, over to you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a great pleasure to come here and see how we can move actions. So yeah, in this thematic, as coming from the Sahel regions, I know the importance of how restoring the land, protecting the land can be very important, not for the government action, but for the people that are living on it and depending on those land. And I just want to remind how much we are acting, less or more, how many years we are on the conventions, and how we can change maybe the way that we can give the hope to the communities. It's 31st years that people are negotiating the 3 Rio Convention. Many have not born. It is for the first time we are having indigenous peoples in this COP since then. So it's a great moment, but it's also like really community who are protecting the land forever. Is the first time that they are showing in a big number in these conventions. So that means climate change is exacerbating all the land degradations. Biodiversity is losing a lot, and that also accelerates the land degradations, and the first victim are the communities. I come from Mbororo pastoralist peoples. We are nomadic and semi-nomadic, so our life and livelihood depend from the nature. And nature is everything for us. It's our supermarket, it's our food, it's our medicine, it's our clean water. But nature is getting threatened, and our life are getting threatened. It creates conflict between communities to fight to access to the remaining resources. But the extreme weather events impacted people even more. In the Sahel region this year, the extreme flood that we are facing is enormous. Just the example of my own country. Over a month, we got 2 million people become homeless. Millions of hectares of land gone. 100 people died. So that means we need to think differently. Stop talking and go to the action. And here where the thematic is coming. As my sister Jacinda said, at the COP29, there was the adoption of the Article 6.4 on the carbon market. For many of us as indigenous peoples, we were not happy, just to be honest with you. And we were not happy because of one reason. We say, is that going to be a right solution or a forced solution? Is that going to be access and benefit sharing, or again, they are going to organize a conference and maybe buy a big car for the project managers and forget the communities? But at the same time, for the community like mine, region like mine in the Sahel, we say maybe it is an opportunity. And when we talk about the Great Green Wall, we say maybe it is a community projects. So how we can use this outcome to make it beneficiaries to the communities. Now, either we like it or not, we get the decisions on the Article 6.4. So it is the time for government to set up a right legislation, regulations of what is the meaning of the carbon market. How the company can use not a greenwashing to say, I'm paying for the carbon, but I'm still have to dig the fossil to emit the carbon. So we cannot mitigate this action by continuing harming the nature. But how the company can say, they can give to repair what already they did. We need also a legislation from the government to government, an honest one. The developed countries who are not only developed, they are overdeveloped, I can say, because I come from the community who do not have access to water or to electricity, where in their place they are talking about flying car, not only electric cars. So how we can fill this gap? It cannot be they are paying their offset from the aviations and industry to the developing countries to say we are giving you that as charity. So how they can change the mind, paying that as environmental responsibility and restorations. The government need to set a legislations on the financial infrastructure restorations. The finance, when you look at the IMF, the World Bank, all those have set up the rules between themselves without developing countries. They need to reform that, include the needs of developing countries, and that means how this payment can end the debt. Not ending the debt as forgiving, but ending the debt as environmental payment. So those legislation as principle need to be set up. And then we can talk about how the carbon market can benefit the communities, the real communities on the ground. And for that one, we need to set up a principles of right-based approach. So every market of the carbon must respect the indigenous people's rights, right to land, right to resources. And they must respect how the indigenous peoples are protecting the different landscape, not only into the forest, because that can go only to the tropical forests. And if you only focus on the tropical forest, we did that for also 30 years. The door of the tropical forest will be destroyed, and people will go there to the tropical. So it's have to protect the savannas, the grassland, and the land that are protecting the carbon. So opening of all the landscape. And then they have to ensure the false solutions are not part of the carbon market. Then they have to ensure, finally, the direct access finance to the communities. How the communities can get the bigger funding, that they can change their own life, but not in a small fund. When they wanted to fund the community, they say, oh, let's give them 5,000, the maximum to the 20 or 100,000. While we are talking about billions. Even here, we are so happy we have 4 billions announcement. And these 4 billions must open a window for direct access finance for the communities. So the carbon market must open a direct access window to indigenous peoples directly in order to help the land, to restore the land, and we can talk about the access and benefit sharing. And finally, the board of each carbon market must have indigenous peoples there, because when you are in the board, you can help to change the decisions. When you have an advisory board, in a side of the board, they can inform, but they cannot change. So we are asking as indigenous peoples to every organizations, from government or non-governmental or the mix, to ensure they sit in the board for indigenous peoples, not to harm, but to guide, to ensure transparency, accountability, and to ensure the direct access finance to all the communities. So those key messages, I leave you with that, and I hope this event will give us a perspective to really implement the Great Green Wall. And maybe in the coming years, I will not talk about the floods, drought, but I will talk about the real benefit that the communities have in all the Sahel region. And I thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Hindou, for your comprehensive and passionate call to action. I'd like now to move us on to the launch of a report jointly prepared by TreeAid and the World Economic Forum, entitled The Untapped Potential of the Great Green Wall Voluntary Carbon Market Projects, How Unlocking Opportunities for Sahelian Communities. So we'll first hear from Nicole Schwab, the co-head at the Nature Positive Pillar and the member of the Executive Committee at the World Economic Forum. Unfortunately, Nicole couldn't be with us today, but she left us a message to watch.
Wanti.org, the World Economic Forum's Trillion Trees initiative, has been supporting the Great Green Wall for the last 4 years as one of the major landscape-level initiatives. And we released an initial report looking at the restoration-based value chains that had the biggest potential to deliver on climate, on biodiversity, on resilience, but also to deliver economic benefits to the local communities. As a result of this report, we've really seen amazing examples, and we've grown a community of entrepreneurs, we call them ecopreneurs, who are active in the spaces of agroforestry, who are working on some of these value chains that are from of the major tree crops. And we see that there are many solutions at hand, and there is a huge potential. We are now releasing a new report in collaboration with TreeAid, looking at a very specific piece of this potential, namely the voluntary carbon markets, and how carbon finance can be an additional source of finance to complement the economic activities of these populations and of these projects. So we're very excited about the potential, but we feel that to really unlock this untapped potential, we are going to need large-scale multi-stakeholder partnerships. And we hope that the UNCCD COP can be a place and an opportunity to start to consolidate some of these partnerships.
Thank you, Nicole, and thanks, Tillem, for arranging the filming of the video. I'll now turn to Tom Skirrow, the CEO of TreeAid, to tell us a bit more about the report.
Great, thanks, Annie. And yeah, thanks to the first two speeches. They were incredibly inspiring and interesting. So I will sadly fall short compared to them. But I am really excited about this report that we're co-releasing with the Wanti.org and World Economic Forum. I think partially this is about, many, many years of trying to drive funding into areas that do not have the requisite funding. And we've tried a lot with public funding, and we've had a lot of, there's just not enough money in the public purse. And we've looked at finance from private sector, and they've said, well, yeah, but my value chain doesn't really run in the Sahel, so I'm not sure I can really get involved. And so the opportunity for carbon markets could be really transformative. And so we at TreeAid have certainly tried to lead on a front foot with that. We've started proof of concept, so we're running projects across 3 different countries, in the Sahelian countries, in the Great Green Wall, in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Senegal at scale. And what we're trying to do is dispel some of those myths around the idea that it's too dry. Do trees really survive in the Sahel? Is that possible? So all of these ideas that put people off and put people into thinking that maybe the Sahel is the last place that they would go to invest. And what we're trying to say is, this is a great opportunity. This is a place with severely degraded forests. This is a place where you don't have to do land change. You need to get the land back to what it was. This isn't about seizing up private land and creating plantations. This is about native species, restoration in community-run and community-managed land. This is a win-win-win for everyone involved. So we've launched this paper really to try and get the story out there as much as possible, to try and pull in sources from a range of different examples, from a range of data that we've done research over the last year to say, this is what's possible. This is how it can be done. On top of that, we also want to say this is how it shouldn't be done. And so I think Hindou's points about the dangers of bad investments and the Jacinda's point about the drive for profits can be dangerous, right? If you are in an unequal negotiation, often the more powerful wins the negotiation, and we have to be really careful when communities are involved that don't necessarily have the full understanding of the carbon markets, that they're not exploited. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is not just to say that this is just and right fully involve and fully support and push the majority of money to the community. It's also saying that's how you make a successful project. You don't make a successful project by annoying the people who are looking after that land, and eventually, you know, you are going to annoy them, so it's not going to work. So it's pragmatic as well as just. I think, you know, we've seen some areas about business for land investments, and sorry, I'm just getting a little indicator from the back. I think, you know, this is an opportunity that I think is really important because, you know, you look back at the SDGs when they were launched, and those SDGs said that we leave no one behind. And, you know, since we've been at TRIAID, it feels very much like the Sahel is being left behind. It's being left behind when it comes to discussions around private investment, around farmland, and around global value chains and our global food systems. It's left behind around many of the donor countries who are moving out because it's simply too insecure, or it's simply too hard for them to work there. And it's being left out in many ways for the carbon markets because people want to choose the easier choice. And this is a place that should not be left behind. So now's the time for action. So I'm just going to give you one last summary of our report, which will just come up on a video right now. So if we can start that video. Thanks.
The Sahel is one of the world's most affected regions by the climate crisis. Rising temperatures, extreme weather, and land degradation have wreaked damage on a fragile ecosystem and the communities that rely on it. The Great Green Wall Initiative sets out a grand vision to restore this landscape. Through a mosaic of forest restoration activities, it aims to restore over 100 million hectares of degraded landscapes and improve the lives of local people. But despite its ambitious goals, progress has been hindered by challenging conditions and a persistent lack of funding. However, the region represents a significant opportunity for investment and restoration. TRIAID, 1T.org, and the World Economic Forum's new report highlights this potential. Private investment in the Great Green Wall could yield over $28 billion in value by sequestering 1.8 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent across the region while driving vital land restoration. It's an invitation to see the Sahel as a region of possibility for nature, communities, and private sector investors. This report outlines 5 key recommendations to unlock this potential. 1. Stronger regulatory frameworks to make carbon markets in the Sahel stable and reliable. Governments and international institutions must support the creation of an enabling environment for carbon markets. 2. Ongoing, publicly funded work should be collaborative to lay the foundations for future carbon investments. Alignment with ongoing restoration efforts can maximize the impact and returns of these projects. 3. With the higher risk profile of specific regions within the Sahel, additional incentives need to be created to generate private investment. New public-private partnerships will be critical for reducing investment risk and making the region attractive for carbon projects. 4. Communities in the Sahel must be central to these projects, leading efforts and benefiting from the green jobs they create. When local communities are empowered to lead and benefit from these restoration projects, the quality and viability of carbon credits improve. 5. Building the capacity for all stakeholders in carbon markets is key to ensuring better market conditions. Information gaps exist across the sector, but the market can thrive with transparency and information sharing between stakeholders. TRIAID's Tond Tenga project is an example of what is possible from tapping into the voluntary carbon market. Building on years of experience working together in the region, this 40-year project ensures that the sale of carbon credits generates substantial and rightful benefits for these communities, compensating them for restoring the land they are custodians of while helping to alleviate poverty and strengthen their resilience to climate change. With increased ambition and collaboration, Voluntary carbon markets can help us address the climate crisis while creating lasting prosperity in the Sahel. Explore the full report and join us to realize its transformative potential for Sahelian communities and beyond.
Great. Just as a complement to this overview, I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Alexis Sompougdou, our Riyadh Burkina Faso-based forest governance specialist, who's going to give you a bit more information about the Tontenga project that was just mentioned.
Thank you, Annie. I'm Alexis Sompougdou from 3/8. It's a great pleasure for me to share with you here this case study of Tontenga project. What is this project? This project is a pioneering carbon restoration model implemented in Burkina Faso in 3 regions, as you can see in this map. The duration is for 8 years, about activities implementation in the ground. And the key action we can have, firstly, it's growing more than 6 million trees in the forest and agroforest parkland. Secondly, we have to restore more than 12,000 hectares of land. The third one is how to support a household from 185 villages. There we work in this project. And the last one is how to sequestrate the sequestration of around 3 million ton equivalent CO2. How make this project possible? It's a very great project and is based by local forest governance. This local forest governance is the base and the way by government can transfer some type of authority and decision making to the collectivity, the municipality and the community to manage themselves these forests and provide all the benefits that these forests can give them. Why we adopted this approach of forest governance? The first reason is we have a locally lead approach, and through this approach we can generate optimal benefits around across nature, people, and climate for the communities. Regarding the situation of our country, most of African countries, the situation of political issues, this approach is very important because it's vital de-risking strategy for carbon investment. To add one thing about what make our project a high integrated carbon project. The first aspect is the holistic option, because this project is very holistic. It's considered the first action about bottom to up, how to consider all the needs of the communities. We can have the agriculture aspects, livestock aspects, forest, and also water management. This project is also long-term sustainability. We have to run this during 14 years. It's locally leads, as I said previously. It's also fair and transparent because we develop with the communities a benefit sharing mechanism. We have also a very good engagement of communities through the free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC. This project is also equitable and inclusion of communities in carbon market with the voluntary carbon market. For the communities, it's a very great project with a great impact of carbon investment. As said, one members of cooperative, Seydou Zungrana, our standard of living has improved significantly thanks to Project Tontenga. This money is reinvested in income-generating activities such as production, seedlings, growing legumes and nutrition garden, and processing forest products. More trees, more carbon, more income. I stop there, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexis. So for those who want to know more about this report, you'll be able to use the QR code on the screen to actually read the full report online, and I invite you to do so. In the meantime, we'll actually open this up for a conversation to dig a little bit deeper into the very interesting insights we've heard. And for that, I'll hand over moderation to my colleague Tillem Burlace, regional lead for the Africa and Europe region at onetree.org and the World Economic Forum.
Thanks so much, Annie, and I would like to really thank Hindou for her opening remarks. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Actually, we're really glad to have all of our opening remarks staying on the panel. So we're going to dig into a deeper conversation. But to join us, I'd really also like to invite Mana Farooghi, FCDO's Regional Climate and Nature Advisor for the Sahel. So great to have the UK government support here, as well as Chris Armitage, CEO of the Global Evergreening Alliance. So welcome to the stage. And we've already heard a lot about why voluntary carbon markets are important for the Sahel and for the Great Green Wall. But maybe I'll just open that question up a little bit more for some other perspectives. So, Mana, for the UK government, why do you think carbon markets are important for the Great Green Wall area?
Thank you very much, Tillem, and thank you for inviting me on this panel. We've been working, I think, remotely together with a number of people here, and it's really great to be able to finally meet everyone in person. So why are carbon markets important in the Sahel and for Sahelian communities? I would say very simply because we can't afford to not explore them as an option. I think Hindou has shared the example of her community and how they are impacted by climate change and land degradation. This is something that is unfortunately shared by many people in the Sahel region. We know that 80% of people in the Sahel live from rain-fed farming and livestock herding. And they're directly dependent on the health of their landscape and their ecosystems for their well-being. We also know that the Sahel knows one of the worst rates of land degradation. Some organizations assess that, for example, in Niger, they are losing an area equivalent to 500 football pitches of arable land every year. And we also know that Sahel communities are exposed to the worst effect of climate change. I think all Sahel countries are within the top 10 most vulnerable countries to climate change on the Notre Dame Gain Index. So, all of this is leading to a number of the issues that have already been mentioned. We know that, for example, the Sahel knows some of the worst rates of chronic food insecurity. And this is exacerbated every year by the rate of land degradation, which is increasing the frequency and the intensity of the flood and drought cycles. So I would say we don't really have time. We need urgent action. And urgent action requires urgent investment at scale. The Sahel countries have costed their NDCs, and the needs are in the billions, really, to tackle the climate and nature and biodiversity crisis. We also know, as Tom mentioned, that public finance is not going to cover it. And so we need to think really creatively about, and explore all possible options to finance large-scale land, soil, and water cycle improvement. So carbon markets they happen to be one of the options that's worth exploring, and if they are harnessed properly, they can really mobilize the much-needed private finance that we need and yield nature, biodiversity, and development co-benefits. The UK is a strong supporter of carbon pricing and a pioneer on carbon markets, both through our domestic action and support for the uptake of carbon pricing and market schemes globally. Over the past year, we've worked in the Sahel with many of you guys and with our partner Sun2Green to identify the key challenges and opportunities for removing barriers to access to carbon markets, both compliance market and voluntary markets. We found that there are a number of challenges around the methodologies and carbon protocols that are specific to carbon removal in dryland ecologies. Challenges around the price of carbon and the cost of certification, the really long time frames for certifications, and some issues around land tenure that make it very challenging to discuss the very questions of benefit sharing that have come up. But we're very excited to see initiatives led by the World Economic Forum, by TRIAD and others to increase collaboration in this space. This is very important, and the work of the Global Evergreening Alliance as well, in trying to harmonize all of these efforts. And we are very glad to have, I think the UK has now in Uganda invested in one of those harmonization initiatives to try and also create more experience around how to harness the power of public and private partnerships. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mana. And I think, that's exactly, we've heard why it's important, and it's fantastic that the UK government is supporting how do we move forward with this. But Chris, we know why, but how will this work? From your experience, tell us a little bit more about, what is the vehicle that's going to take this forward? Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Tillem. Before I go into the how, I just want to echo the words of some of my colleagues up here about the enormous challenges across the Sahel. Of course, we all know about the terrible issues of land degradation and food insecurity, and some of the security challenges that make it difficult for investments. But as Tom said, there's this assumption that it's too difficult to grow trees in the Sahel. In actual fact, I think the Sahel is holds one of the greatest opportunities for assisted natural regeneration or farmer-managed natural regeneration. One of the most common species across the Sahel, Phytohobia albida, is a truly remarkable species, I think unique in the world, as far as I understand, with in its ability to complement and support much more productive, resilient, and reliable cropping systems. And I think there's an enormous opportunity to scale up some of these practices in a very, very cost-effective way. These are practices that are organically scaling across various parts of the Sahel, but with appropriate programmatic support, they can have enormous impact. We can accelerate those efforts tremendously. And I think this represents a fantastic opportunity for large-scale programmatic support, which of course is what's required for carbon market investments. We need scale, we need cost-effective approaches, we need aggregation. And I just want to mention, from the experiences that we've had in dealing with some of the big corporate global investors, there is an enormous interest in demonstrating high quality, high integrity programs. We know all of the negative publicity we've been hearing about the carbon markets and some of the challenges with historic approaches. There have been some very challenging issues in the past, particularly with corporate interests exploiting the carbon markets and land grabbing, land use change, pushing communities out of farmlands. But I think there's an enormous demand going forward for high integrity, farmer-led carbon removals programs. And I think the Sahel holds enormous opportunity for those sorts of programs to be designed in a way that is very, very cost effective and scalable, and where the impacts are so desperately needed. And I think we heard earlier about the imperative of corporates to maximize profits. A lot of corporates, I think, are starting to look at the longer term implications of carbon programs in the way they generate profits. It's not just about the returns they receive from the carbon credits, but it's the way their brand is presented from the investments that they make. On the one hand, there's a lot of apprehension, a lot of worry about being seen to be greenwashing, being seen to be investing in programs that will come under public criticism and attract negative reports from the media, which damage their brand and impact their profits. On the other hand, there's an enormous opportunity for generating positive marketing collateral, being able to demonstrate that the investments that they're making to offset their carbon footprints are also delivering tangible, quantifiable, desperately needed community benefits. And there's a great interest to maximize those benefits, and we're better than the Sahel. So I think, building on the work that TRIAID has been doing, I think there are some fantastic examples of high quality carbon projects. One of the great challenges is creating certainty in the market, creating a sense that investments into positive projects that are high integrity, that are going to deliver real, tangible, quantifiable benefits for communities is a safe investment, not just because of the political instability, but because of the public sort of concern about carbon programs. I really feel that we can mobilize a lot more corporate investment. We can turn a lot of these massive financial pledges that we hear so much about into real action. We can get that money to the ground much faster if corporates see this as a safe space to invest. Of course, with integrity guidelines and systems in place to ensure the quality and equitability of the approaches being taken. And of course, it takes enormous collaboration. And that's not just collaboration between NGOs and communities, not just collaboration in the design and implementation of programs, but we also need to work very, very closely and effectively with governments. A lot of the legislation that we're seeing emerge around the world around carbon offsetting is informed with a backwards-looking approach, looking at the experiences that we've had from carbon investments and designing legislative frameworks and policies to create safeguards and protect communities from some of the negative impacts that they've seen from past carbon programs. The real situation is that there's enormous innovation happening in the carbon markets, and what we need to solve some of the problems of the future is quite different to the approaches that have been taken in the past. So I think there's a desperate need to work with governments to build that capacity and understanding and design legislation that supports the projects that we need for the future.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I think on that point, you know, we do see this need for certainty, and in some ways, the criticism of the voluntary carbon market has started to drive the objectives of the private sector, of communities, closer together to that understanding that high integrity means delivering benefits for communities, but it also means safeguarding the investments of the private sector. In thinking about how integrity is improving, Jacinda, can you tell us a little bit more about what's been happening in Africa that is providing some of that certainty and is moving the market in the right direction?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tillem. At the Climate Champions team, one of the initiatives we helped launch, I think I mentioned, was the African Carbon Market Initiative. And one of the key things that they have been doing from the beginning is working with governments throughout different countries to help them establish regulatory frameworks around carbon markets, voluntary and compliance, in order to create some stability in the market and some transparency around how carbon is treated in those particular countries. And to be very honest, it's not an easy thing, and it's not a fast-moving thing, and it has been quite a bumpy ride for some of these countries to even get to the point where they can establish a clear, transparent legislation. But we do think that that's part of the solution. Another piece of it is that we're focused on is local monitoring, reporting, and verification. So, you know, we love Vera, we love Gold Standard, but we also appreciate that a lot of those are international organizations coming from outside, and a lot of the value of the carbon credit is being sequestered off into these larger organizations in order to verify and monitor and report. And so part of what we're doing at ACME is training local lawyers and attorneys to be able to monitor and verify and report on carbon credit projects and other sustainable innovation financial products. So I think that, you know, the upskilling of the market in general, whether it's the local financial institutions who can help to incorporate some of these mechanisms into the market and kind of underwrite, you know, and ensure some of these products in various ways. I think that the insurance companies playing a role in, you know, really understanding how these products can increase the value of agricultural yields and increase the value of the supply chains. I think that carbon credits are essential in having integrity, and that they can be a core value add for some of these products that can then be launched as organic or, you know, sustainable products, and that can increase the return for these agriculture and other market players. So I think that, you know, one piece of increasing the capacity of the market to really understand these innovations and to be able to use them more will allow the markets to be stronger from the ground up, right? I think that, you know, the local communities really understanding and participating in shaping their market is a key part of having integrity in the markets. And I think that owning, you know, the carbon credit process and having local lawyers and young people who are trained in sustainability in universities who come back home and can help the communities and these local NGOs and indigenous communities and be the advocates, and then they're getting, you know, that part of the capital that is going into the credit project. So, you know, yes, you're going to still have some parts of the distribution that need to go to the project developer, whether they're local or not, right? You're going to have a piece that goes to the MRV, whether they're local or not, and then you're going to have that piece that actually comes down to the project. So in my opinion, the more pieces of the pie that can be brought to the local level, that's going to increase the ability of that local community to own and monitor and report on those projects. And they know the market, right? They know the players in the market. They're able to kind of really be the eyes on the ground, you know, to make sure that things are operating in the right way. So to increase integrity, it's not only about, you know, making sure that Gold Standard and Vera are signing off on these products and methodologies and, you know, and including more methodologies that are beneficial to the community, but also including the community more in that monitoring and reporting and verification, and having the local financial institutions taking ownership of these processes in order to really streamline and bring more of that capital to the community.
Thanks so much, Jacinda. And I mean, I think sort of stepping back to the changes that have been taking place, I wanted to also understand from Mana what the UK government is doing in terms of supporting high integrity in the market.
Thanks, Tillem. I think this reminds me of an analogy someone used about carbon markets. You know, they compared it with the used car sales markets. You know, where everybody comes to you and say, "I have a great car," but you're never sure, you know, what you're getting and you know when it's gonna sort of break down on you. And I think it's very important to, you know, as we say, we don't really have time to waste. And we don't want to be, you know, wasting our time on sort of failed attempts and false promises for Sahel communities. And so we need to be very clear on the benefits and the costs of developing these solutions and these products. And it's in this context that the UK is supporting action to unlock very high integrity carbon and nature voluntary markets. So the UK has published its principles for voluntary carbon and nature market integrity, and supports organizations engaged in voluntary action towards net zero. What we have done is that we've provided seed funding into 2 initiatives launched at COP26 during our presidency of COP26, which you might be aware of. The first one is the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. And the second is the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, VCMI. And I think these initiatives have provided much needed clarity already. But it's now, I guess, time for governments, as we mentioned, civil society, the private sector and communities to really work together to take advantage of the opportunities that these initiatives are offering.
Thanks so much.
And I just want to add that they're both part of the African Carbon Market Initiative, so we do make sure that we align with those principles in everything we do.
Fantastic. And I mean, I think this touches on a point of partnership and collaboration, and it's vital to be bringing the local knowledge. And Hindou, from your perspective, what is the partnerships that are needed to support communities to really benefit from voluntary carbon markets and carbon markets more broadly?
Thank you, and I'm super happy to hear both of your presentations, because that gives really a lot of perspective of having government, private sector are already joining. So what we can do to really ensure that the communities are taking into considerations in this carbon market, especially in the Sahel. So I know that through the trillion trees, there was a mapping that started at the exercise. So we need to finalizing the mapping of the communities in the Sahel, of the organizations. So we cannot also pick and choose. We have to map all, the youth organization, the indigenous organization, the women organization, the farmers organizations, the pastoralist organizations. So all the different livelihood around all the Sahel regions, because those peoples who live and depend from this nature, they have their own organizations. It could be formal, as you can have my association who have the name, the registration, but it could be informal, because there are many organizations from the communities who are a community-based organization without an official recognitions. So we need to include everyone, so that allows us to do not pick and choose. And this is also the importance of having this initiative beyond the government. Maybe government can ask those who have the papers to be listed in their government system to say, like, those are the organization. But this initiative must include those who do not have an organization, but who are living around the Sahel, who are the guardian of the land. So this is like the first step that we need to do. Secondly, we need to see what the peoples are doing on the ground. They are already having their life and livelihood, who are getting impacted. The benefit that they want maybe it's different than the benefit that is defined by those who went to school and who are in this committee or communities of the initiative. So it has to be listening from the peoples there on the ground. If they say they wanted to use the money to build the school, it is their choice. If they say no, they wanted to use the money just to buy whatever food they need or whatever divided that they need, they have the choice, they have the right to do not dictate to the communities. These benefiting projects have to go to find water here, to find food there, and you already like defining what the peoples can do. And it's going to be the same way of the development that community will never get what they need. Of course, they can say like, yes, we can get it because they wanted to benefit from it, but it is not the sustainable way. So the sustainable way is giving the communities what they need. So listening from the community who define what they need themselves. And thirdly, it has to be flexible money that is given to the communities. They can give the money, maybe the community say, we want to have this money to do the water, to do agriculture. And when there is flood, there is no anymore a arable land that they can cultivate. But they know what they need immediately. They can say, oh, we can shift this money as we have it to do another activities. Maybe how to do cattle or how to do whatever. If the money from the beginning is not flexible, so that means they know there is money and it's not responding to their need, to their life. So at the end of the day, it's not the benefit sharing that we want. So we need the flexible money because we are talking into the context of climate, biodiversity, and the Sahel region where the weather patterns is so changeable every single day. So that's really what we need from the beginning. But of course, we need so many at the end to sit down and define those needs by the communities and with the communities.
Thank you so much, Hindou. And one of the things that I was very impressed with in our study was actually triades, their ability to achieve a 70% survival rate in the Sahel because of their approach to really engaging communities and working with them to understand their needs. So I think, Tom, if you could sort of share more on kind of triades' approach to really engaging communities and understanding how benefit sharing can and should work for their benefit. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, Hindou, your point was so well made there. Just to add, I think we need to maybe get away from this phrase benefit sharing. It's a wage. You're being paid to deliver a service or deliver a product. And why would anybody tell someone, here's your salary and this is how you should spend it? So we really need to realize that private sector investment into carbon is like any other private sector investment. It's going into a place where those workers are doing the work on the ground and those workers are going to be compensated effectively. And we have to be careful, obviously, like in many value chains, that those wages are just and correct. So that's where our fight is to make sure that we have a fair trade in carbon, essentially, that these people are being compensated the right amount and that they get a vast majority of the benefits that come out of any investment. So thanks for that. Yeah, I think in the Sahel, it can be a tough place to do work if you don't know who you're working with, essentially. There was a story once of a team, who I won't name, who went out to Senegal and said, we get 10% survival on our trees planted in the Sahel. It's just the problem with the soil. And I said, okay, so what did you do? And they said, well, we got in a truck and we drove down the road and then we dug some holes and we put them in the ground and then we went back home. So did you speak to anybody locally? No, but it was just a bit of wasteland. I mean, of course they'd love the trees there. So, of course, you have 10% survival, not because it's too dry or because it's too difficult in that space. It's because you don't talk to those who actually are custodians of that land, understanding where they want to grow those trees, why they have a vested interest in protecting those trees. So it's such a paramount thing that we understand that we're paying the skilled people to do the skilled work on the ground, and if we do it right and we trust them, they'll do an amazing job.
Thanks so much, Tom. And Chris, I mean, Global Evergreening Alliance has one of the largest smallholder farmer-led carbon programs maybe in the world, definitely in Africa. Unfortunately, not yet in the Great Green Wall, but we do what we can. We're working in the background. We'll get it there one day. But Chris, can you, I mean, from your experience, how do you mobilize communities for carbon, and what sort of benefits are coming through to them?
Thanks very much, Tillem. Can I just comment on Tom's little story before? I can't believe that 10% actually survived with that approach. I think that's a very high survival rate when you're 2 or 3%. No, so one thing I just want to start by saying about the approach that we take is that first and foremost, we're not designing carbon programs. We are not, well, we do develop carbon projects, but we sort of came to do this accidentally. The Alliance wasn't created as a carbon program developer. Our mission is to support our member organisations and vulnerable communities on the ground to support the adoption of appropriate agroforestry systems and build sustainable livelihoods, not to generate carbon. In fact, it's only in recent years that we've started working with corporate investors. And because, as you know, we've heard from a number of the earlier statements, there just simply isn't enough public funding to address the enormity or the urgency of the problems. So we need to mobilise more resources. So these programs are designed collaboratively with organisations that have been working for decades on the ground with communities. They're designed with the communities for them to adopt the practices that are going to maximise the benefit to their livelihoods, to increase the productivity and profitability of their existing farming systems. So it's not changing what they're doing, it's enhancing what they're doing and supporting them to do that. So the primary benefit will always be the activities that they're adopting. The carbon is just a mechanism for financing these programs. And of course, the communities do receive the majority of the revenue from carbon credits as well. But we have to remember that we don't know what the carbon markets are going to do in the future. So there may be no carbon market, or the value of carbon credits may be so low that the revenue they receive might be negligible. And so we're always very, very keen to communicate to communities that the incentive for being part of these programs and adopting these practices shouldn't be the carbon. It should be the direct benefits they receive from adopting more productive, sustainable farming systems. And of course, you know, we need to develop equitable benefit sharing mechanisms, and we do that with communities and with all of the organisations we work with. But that's a potential benefit. They'll receive the majority of the revenues from credits, but that shouldn't be the driving motivation.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I think this links back to OneT.org and the studies we've done. This is really the sister study to our restoration-based value chain study. And it's just we realize that when we're looking at what do communities need to be able to enable them to do restoration, it's important that they're receiving the value from what they do. And carbon is just one more value chain that can enable them to earn decent living wages for taking care of the environment as they do, and for actually profiting from the work that they do. We actually have a little bit of time now for some questions, so I would love to open it up. We have a big panel, so what I'm going to do, we will take 2-3 questions, and I will ask volunteers from the panel, not get everyone to answer, who would like to take them. Thanks so much. So we've got 1, 2, 3 in the first 2 rows.
I'm hearing a lot about benefit sharing, but I'm not really hearing, you know, what's the percentage going to who? And so it'd be interesting to hear, because I know cases where none of it goes to smallholder farmers, and so it'd be good to just hear some numbers.
Hello. My question is this. I carefully listened to Hindou introduction, where he spoke about the people being nomadic and their deep dependence on nature. In Nigeria, one of the major threats to my restoration efforts and the significant contributor to deforestation is the nomadic Fulanis, who indiscriminately graze on our farmland. And now my question is, what role do the indigenous people you represent play in developing a carbon market in Chad area you are? And is there anyone I can probably share, learn from you that I can adopt, that can put an end to these challenges I face regularly from the hand of the Fulanis? I have another one question for. Okay. We are currently developing a carbon market in collaboration with the local community, adopting crops which benefit them and are not vulnerable to logging. So you are yet to be in the Great Green Wall as is. And while we continue with our work, could it be possible, maybe when you are ready for us, adopt our projects for support? These are my questions.
Often the agroforestry programs where the trees will take at least 5 or 7 years for the income to come through for the farmers. Now in the initial stages, the farmers' real struggle is to have some sort of financial support for them to take the pits, plant the trees, maintain it for the first 5 years so that they are able to get best survival rates. Now the carbon finance, after the audit is happening and the first issuance happens, it's after 5 or 6 years usually. So during this period, is there any financing mechanisms where the buyers are not applying heavy discounts like 50% discounts or 40% discounts on forward sale contracts and so on and so forth? Is there a way that we can kind of secure the credit pricing for the farmers in such a way that just the strength of the agroforestry model can be a collateral for these people to invest in? Probably they can take a smaller discount of 10% or 15%, but they're actually ripping them off if they ask for money for the first 5-6 years of survival. How do we work around this system? Because this is the limiting factor for scaling up, and we are working in India. We are in the final stages of signing a program with a carbon project developer, and we see this as a critical limitation for scaling these initiatives. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So I actually have an idea of who answers most of the questions. Tom, are you willing to share your benefit sharing percentages?
We can definitely start a conversation. I tend to be not very well behaved about signing NDAs and keeping to them, but there is a general problem across the board. I will say mine in a minute, but there's a general problem across the board because you can't compare and contrast because everyone's like, oh, I can't tell you. And the investors are like, we don't want you to tell anyone because this is our special deal, right? So there's a whole secrecy there which we need to blow out, and we need to have some kind of double-blind reporting online or something so we don't know who it is or what, but we know what the deal is. Anyway, just to preempt that, I will talk a little bit about the kind of models that we're trying to develop. So there's a slight complexity, so I'll bring your question into it, because what we do is we forward sell at a discount a certain amount of credits, because that generates the money that means that we can run the project until the retirements are possible. So in the Burkina Faso model, we forward sell on behalf of the community 60% of the credits. So that way someone's buying them, but they're getting them at a cheaper rate. But there's a risk return element to that, right? It's that nothing exists for the next 8 years, and certainly it doesn't all exist for 40 years. So that's fine. We have a reasonably good deal on that. So we forward sell, that gives us the money to then deliver the project. And then the community then gets, from that 60% sale, about 70% of the value of that, because the other 30% is, you know, your registrations, your verifications, etc. Then they get the 40%, which is like, I think it's about 1.1 million tons, that keeps retiring between 2030 and, yeah, I can't add up, but for the next 30 years. And that idea is basically that those keep coming out, and then there's more money. Now, how much money that is, we don't know. We have speculations on the market that it might be $100 a ton in the next 10 years. So if you imagine that with 1.1 million tons that they're producing over the next, 30 years, it could be worth over $110 million going straight to them. So that's the model. And again, I'm really open to being told that's not as good as it could be because we got this great deal over here. But at this point, no one's really sharing.
Thanks, Tom. And Chris, I mean, your willingness to share on this topic or ability maybe is
certainly. Well, to sort of agree with Tom with his first statement, you actually can't compare between projects and between organizations because there are so many different ways that programs are financed. And also, I know TreeAid's programs are done in a very different way to ours, and so you really can't compare them. The particular model that we've developed, which is a different programmatic approach, it's a different approach in terms of activities in the areas that we work. We've developed a minimum model and that is that investors can never get more than 50% of the carbon credits. But as I said, it's a different sort of set of activities, delivering a different value proposition to investors. So you really can't compare between organizations. Again, the way our programs are funded is that the investor will pay upfront for the entire program, and they receive a return of a predetermined number of credits at a fixed price based on current market prices at a discounted rate. But that will, if under the current modelling that's more than 50%, then the deal's not viable. It has to be less than 50% of what's projected to be produced. But as I said, different projects are funded in very different ways and deliver different sorts of benefits to the communities.
I'm sorry. Now, if the market crashes, the fixed price, what happens then?
So they're not buying the credits, they're receiving a number of credits. Okay. So it doesn't matter what the market does. They're not wanting to sell credits. We only work with investors that want to retire the credits. And we're currently not working with any, or we haven't worked with any extractives. So these are, they're very much voluntary investments. They don't need to make the investments, but they consider that it's the right thing to do to offset their carbon footprints.
And Chris, briefly, while we're with you, for those in the room that are doing projects, what is Global Evergreening Alliance's approach to partnering with organizations doing restoration?
That's why we exist. That's what we do. We're a collaborative alliance.
Fantastic. And then moving to quite a different question, but Hindou, what is the place for pastoralists and nomads in voluntary carbon markets?
Yeah, but I'm going to touch base on all your questions. It's so brilliant questions. And what Tom and Chris said is so important. That's why, as principal and as representing community, we asked for the principle of transparency, accountability. What make it if we do not see the number and they are careful, the investor don't want to show the numbers, what ensuring us that it's not greenwashing? So this is the things. So this is where the role of the government to put a clear legislation on transparency and accountability. You wanted to do good for planet, put your numbers out. As he said, he put the numbers. Maybe it is not the best, maybe we can criticize, but we can give the idea how you can improve it, how you can make it better, how you cannot exploiting the communities. Because that's what is happening around the nature. We exploiting the communities and saying like, oh, we are paying you for what you are doing. And just like clap for us. Like, no, you are getting the money from us to make yourself even more wealthy and saying you are giving us. So if you are giving, you have to be transparent. So this principle have to be really clear to get the numbers out. And as you said, also have to get the market, accessing the communities to the market. Otherwise, we cannot know when the price going down or going up. So this is so important for the Sahel. And the trust can make the business good. Trust can break it. And I come from Chad. We just broke our relation with France over all the colonization because also of the lack of trust. All the Sahelian regions are just blocking politically. So this is so important. But coming to you, to my brother, about the Sahel pastoralists, and especially pastoralists in Nigeria, deforestation but conflict. There are a lot of conflict. We are watching a lot of video. People are killing each other, farmers and pastoralists, not only pastoralists. So farmers saying pastoralists are destroying our nature. Pastoralists are saying it is our land. When we come with our cattle and we move from one place to another one, our cow dung fertile the land. And when we go, by the time that we come, the land is fertile, the farmers come and sit there. And when we come back, there is no way. So we have to fight. And at the end, the government are struggling. So what we are doing in Chad, you wanted to know. So in Chad, I'm not in the project of the carbon market. Maybe not yet. Maybe it will come when we set up all the principles that respect what we want. Maybe I can work with him, with his transparency. Maybe not with other organizations. Maybe with Chris. So it's depends. Maybe it will come. But what I'm doing a project that call it participatory mapping. So I do mapping with the communities by using science and technology, from satellite imageries for the 2D, or the geographical information for the 3D. And when we map the land, participatory with all the communities, farmers, pastoralists, fishermen, all the seasonal, not seasonal, they come, they map the land, they put all the data. They define the corridor of pastoralists. They define the agriculture area. They define the sacred trees, the food trees, and the medicinal trees. So then that's done by the communities. At the end of the day, we digitalize, we go back to the community with the map that they adopted themselves. And then when there is conflict, it's not the government who can come and say, you are wrong, you are right, you pay this, and you are right, or whatever. It is the community who sit, because they create committee, not the committee of government, but by the communities to resolve these issues. And they are the one who decide where we can replant the trees, because they know which kind of trees, not only any kind and numbers. And that helps to live in harmony between them, and also to restore the land, doing the carbon, but they are not benefiting from it. So if you want to know more about that, I will be very happy to share with you the work that I am doing, and it can help the Sahel in this project we are talking about. Thank you.
Thanks, Hindou. And so critical, starting from the communities. I'm going to take third from the back and in white at the back. And sorry, everyone, we're really almost on time, so I'm just going to take these last two questions, but please come afterwards to speak. So at the back in white.
Thank you very much. I am Amos Amanubo, Regional Coordinator for the Global Landscapes Forum in Africa. Really, really great report there, and my question goes to Tom. We're having these discussions about the carbon market's potential in the Sahel, but the perception or the reality of the security issues in this region also something to consider. I wonder how you are building investor confidence in the face of this situation. And then secondly, how you are tailoring your approaches to the carbon market towards building a social capital for peace in the region. Thank you.
Excusez-moi, je peux parler en français? Ok. Vous savez, d'abord j'ai été surpris de voir à une COP de désertification le marché volontaire du carbone. Parce que je sais que c'est une thématique qui est discutée plutôt ailleurs et que je suivais depuis 2006 pour avoir pris part à la mise en œuvre d'un projet de plantation au Niger, s'il vous plaît, avec la Banque mondiale. Le projet Acacia Sénégal, la Banque mondiale. On devait effectivement planter 21 000 hectares sur 8 ans. C'était un des mécanismes du MDP. Moi, je représente toujours l'AND dans le cadre du MDP. Et on a suivi ces plantations. Et la procédure qu'on a prise, effectivement, c'était de signer directement des contrats avec les communautés au niveau local. Effectivement, le gouvernement, le politique est là, il sait, on a signé des papiers avec lui. Mais les contrats ont été signés au niveau local avec les communautés, s'il vous plaît. Peut-être que c'était le premier projet d'ailleurs en Afrique, un projet de plantation, c'était le tout premier en Afrique. Et je vous assure que ça n'a pas été facile parce que nous n'avons pas pu avoir les 21 000 hectares, pour beaucoup de raisons. Le Niger étant vaste, de la capitale au nord, ça fait de 2000 km, à l'est, ça fait 1500 km, et il y a beaucoup de variétés interrégionales. Alors, il y a des variétés, il y a des espèces qui ne marchaient pas dans telle zone et qui marchaient ailleurs. Alors, on a eu difficulté, mais quand même, je vous assure que les communautés, actuellement, elles continuent à toucher les chèques dus à ce crédit carbone. Et on avait signé avec la Banque mondiale $4 la tonne. Peut-être qu'en ce moment-là, pour nous, c'était quelque chose. Le marché carbone était encore à tous ses débuts. Maintenant, oui, le protocole de Kyoto étant fini, le MDP étant tombé, la transition entre le protocole de Kyoto et l'article 6 de l'accord de Paris n'étant pas encore finalisé, peut-être que ça va encore, on ne sait pas. Toutefois, les contrats sont signés et je vous assure qu'avec la communauté, on n'avait aucun problème.
Merci beaucoup.
Oui, oui.
No. On the autre question, là-bas?
No, we had the two questions.
Yes, the one.
Yeah, if I'm okay to answer that first question there, I think you're right. It's interesting because private companies look at risk and return, right? And so you look at some places in the Sahel and they say, wow, that's a big risk. A lot of these people are, sitting behind desks in New York or London, and they just read on the internet about Mali, for example, and they say, well, that risk is so big, I'm not even sure what the return needs to be for me to sign that off. And so we have to think about how do we reach those furthest to reach places? So how do we make the return good enough in that context? So for example, you can de-risk a carbon project with philanthropic or government money. So you can start the project, you can actually get it up and running, prove that it's working really effectively with non-private money, and then you can basically take what is maybe $5 million and make that into $25 million of private investment once you've de-risked it. So it's about, sometimes it's about how those public-private partnerships work and how we all work together to do that de-risking. I think you also asked a question about restoration and peace and security, right? I mean, I think there was a Hindou sadly gone, but that whole area about conflict and land management is there even at a local level, right? We're not just talking about the geopolitical sense, but we're talking about a local level and planning land and having good governance and knowing who gets what and who gets what reward and having that really transparent, for me, in the places that we work is a major way of ensuring that you are reducing conflict within those communities. On the broader sense, I'm probably not qualified to say.
Thanks so much, Tom. And we are right on time. So I want very quickly, just to wrap up, to run along the panel. And my question to you, very short answer, is what innovation or change have you seen recently that inspires you for the possibility of voluntary carbon markets to deliver to Sahelian communities?
So I think that particularly when we talk about the security risk of places in the Sahel, I'm super excited about tech. So I think that tech's potential to really, from satellite position, give us so much more data than it's even giving us now. I think we're like 5 years away from really having absolute exact information all the time, ready to see what's happened, what is the carbon change, what is the land use change, what is all of this information at a touch of a button. So that's super exciting.
I'd say what we mentioned on the integrity principles and that those are being, put in place and they're standardized and they're available for everyone. I think that really helps the market to increase transparency.
I'd say that we're at a point in time that we're starting to see some really exciting methodologies being proven and starting to deliver results and inspire much larger scale investments and much more willingness to invest in the sorts of programs that are appropriate for the Sahel.
And from a UK perspective, I think integrity and trust is one of the most important ones, and we're really keen to continue working with you on those, but also the recent collaboration around public and private partnerships, and as we've been discussing how we can use public funding to de-risk some of these more risky investments and scale them up. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you to Triade for the support and leadership on this report. And thank you all for your active participation, and have a wonderful rest of your COP. Cheers.